Golgi the Man Muncher is the latest ogre to join the roster and is bringing along some powerful heroes, his own personal squads of maneaters, and a bunch more. Let's take a look at all the new ogre units coming with Omens of Destruction. First up, we have Golgi the Man Muncher himself. Stats wise, he's a more powerful ogre tyrant, dropping a little armor but gaining improvements to everything else but speed. Of course, as with all ogres, he's decently speedy with a lot of mass and some decent charge bonus, making him land in combat with a satisfying impact. Once he's there, his melee power is very respectable, with high attack and damage with a bonus versus infantry. This makes him great for charging straight into the front lines, even on the flanks or just embedded in his own units for some added protection. His defense is also pretty decent for an ogre, so even with his larger size, he won't be taken out too instantly if he gets surrounded. Obviously, avoid this and ranged focus if you can, but it helps on the occasion that he does get caught. Add on his abilities to reduce the damage of nearby enemies and deal some powerful range damage, and he makes for a great flank leader, though not quite as great as Grease's Lightning, may he rest in peace. Our new generic lord is the Ogre Paymaster. As you might guess from the stat card, these are aiming to be much more support lords than damage dealing carries. They have some decent damage with that classic ogre charging and armor piercing damage, however the lower armor does make this considerably more dangerous with the increased vulnerability to pretty much everything. Instead, they want to focus on using their abilities to increase the damage of nearby allies and massively reduce the defense of key targets on the enemy force. You can still get them involved in some combat, just be a little bit more cautious and place them for ability usage rather than damage to get the most value. Coming now to the legendary hero, Brag the Gutsman. This guy is a pretty devastating fighter. As usual, he's got that ogre charging power alongside a lot of follow-up damage with very high attack, armor piercing, and bonus versus large. Defense and armor leave something to be desired, so he's for sure a bit of a glass cannon that you'll want to send against specific targets rather than just slinging him into the nearest combat. He'll do great versus large or mounted lords and heroes, as well as regular monsters, with the added bonus that once they drop below 20% HP, he'll be able to execute them and take them right out the fight in an instant. These abilities are always extremely powerful when used right, so try to use your single use carefully to take out the right target for maximum impact. Aside from this, keep him clear of ranged focus and being surrounded by high damage, and he should collect plenty of meat for the Great Maw. The new generic hero is the Bruisers. These are much more your standard ogre gameplay with a strong focus on charging with the nice mass and bonus. Their attack stat is decent alongside some respectable armor piercing anti-infantry damage, however their low defense makes them very dangerous to leave in sustained melee combat for any period of time, especially against anything with higher damage. They're much better suited to charging and will do great leading ogre flanks, either in the back lines or backs of the front lines, especially alongside other shielded Iron Fists. Their abilities will only toughen nearby allies and soften up enemies, making them great for focusing down those key targets, no matter where they may be. Coming now to the melee infantry, first up we have the Pigback Riders. These are seeing a fairly large drop in entity count and thus HP from Noblars, but fortunately, almost everything else is seeing some nice improvements. Their leadership being increased is probably the best improvement, making them stick around a lot longer and provide a solid line for your ogres to smash through for safer damage. Their own damage is also seeing some improvement with more attack, damage, bonus versus large, and even charge bonus. Their uncanny coordination also gives them a huge bonus to leadership and defense, making them into an extremely solid line given how cheap they are. They're still not going to carry your battles unless you really spec into Noblars, but they're still a massive improvement at the job they were already doing, so I'm not complaining. Next we have Golgi's Maneaters. These are a new top-of-the-line charging ogre infantry. Coming from regular Maneaters, they drop some defense but gain even more attack, armor, and damage with a bonus versus infantry. All this makes them into charging beasts that will plow through most infantry units with ease, no matter where they are on the battlefield. Of course, the low defense makes them weaker in sustained combat, but that's not really the ogre way, so that's just fine. Plus, with their adaptive tactics, even if they find themselves in a losing situation, they buff themselves to even the odds, even for a short time. Still, try not to rely on this too much, as once the buffs run out, they'll be right back in that losing situation. Coming to the monsters and beasts, first up we have the Blood Vultures. Similar to most units like this, they're extremely fast but also extremely fragile. Their abysmal armor and low defense makes them very easy to take down when alone, so the best course of action, as always, is blitz attacks of 2 or more units on a single target. This will keep the target staggered so they can't deal much damage and allow your units to deal damage of their own as fast as possible and get out before help arrives. The best targets will be backlines troops with their non-armor piercing damage. Once they get a few kills under their belt, they'll only get stronger with their carrying frenzy ability, so keep them moving in and out of enemy units to rack up a ton of value. Yetis, when compared to Gorgers, drop the Unbreakable and a little bit of attack and charge, but are otherwise an improvement across the board. Their damage is now armor piercing, magical, and frostbite, so will cut through any defenses an enemy could have and slow them down whilst they're at it. Add on their aura of frost and not much will be able to get away from them or even put up much of a fight once they close the distance. Just like Gorgers, they have high speed, so want to be used as a flanking monster to either take out backlines or charge the backs of front lines depending on the situation. That defensive debuff will be particularly strong on front lines, so don't be afraid to send them in, even with that low defense, if only for a quick charge. They're still not super tanky, so exercise a moderate amount of caution, and they should do great for you. And lastly, we have the Thunder Tusk as the one and only missile monster. Compared to the Stonehorn, it's about the same in melee with a little worse armor and charge, but improved melee stats and HP. In range, however, it drops some range and missile strength to gain ammo and magical frostbite attacks. However, that drop in damage is really just for single targets. These projectiles work a lot more like explosive catapults, dealing that damage in an area, making it much more effective versus clumps of enemies. Add on the curved firing arc and you can even place it behind your ogres and get off relatively safe shots depending on the terrain. You of course want to focus on making use of all that ammo before considering melee, but if push comes to shove and you have no choice, it'll do just fine at charging in and out as long as it doesn't get totally surrounded or focused from a range. And lastly, we have the Regiments of Renown. We have Pigback Knights, Eshin Maneaters, and the Amble Peak Greybacks. And that's everything I have for the new Ogre units, but keep an eye out for Khorne and Greenskin roster videos coming out late today. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 videos, then check out this video on the Sigmar's Heirs Empire Overhaul mod.